much. We're now going to begin our fourth and final round, going back to Mr. Genuis, who is no longer on his porch, now appears to be in the House of Commons. Over to you, Garnet, for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. The sun was in my eyes. It's very clear that this is the same old SDTC, despite claims about changes. This NDP Liberal government's corrupt green slush fund, loaded with conflict of interest. It hasn't changed because it's still being administered by a board using exactly the same model. And the NRC can't answer questions about basic conflict of interest issues that are ongoing. Now, the constant theme that we have at this committee on various issues here, public accounts, is that when things go wrong, the ministers apparently have nothing to do with it. They always want to describe themselves, and Liberal members want to describe ministers as mere passengers on the ship of state. I'm sorry to see that likely at the industry file, we have yet another Liberal minister that seems to be more focused on leadership campaign preparations than on governing. I want to ask specifically, Minister Champagne has said, as Mr. Brock talked about, that there would be enhanced monitoring during the interim period and changes to contribution agreements. When the minister said that, was he telling the truth?
Mr. Chair, I think the previous testimony taken here about the interim period and the monitoring, the review of the files, the AG's observations and those being accepted by the department and SDTC are important. They're there on the record to establish how things will proceed.
Just answer the question. I mean, was the minister, who you report to as well ultimately, was that minister telling the truth when he said they were putting in place changes to contribution agreements and enhanced monitoring? Was Minister Champagne telling the truth? Yes or no?
So, Mr. Chair, the minister's actions are there on the record in terms of suspension of funding, putting in place a new interim board and a process to review the recommendations that have been made, particularly the Auditor General's report, and take appropriate action on that, and then subsequently to have it transferred to us.
I'll stop you there. I mean, I asked you the question twice, and you can't tell me clearly that the minister that you report to was telling the truth, which suggests he wasn't. And hopefully we'll have him before this committee so that he can give an answer directly to that, because he made some claims about changes at SDTC that just don't seem to have actually been made at all. Now, I want to ask about bonuses. Have bonuses been paid to executives, directors, managers that have been working on this green slush fund? Are people that are working on this receiving bonuses?
So, Mr. Chair, I'm not in a position to address bonuses of SDTC or its employees. I think those questions have to be addressed to the organization itself to provide an answer for the members.
Okay, but so you're supposed to be taking over administration of it. So should those bonuses be paid? Will you recommend that they not be paid? What's your position on that going forward?
So, Mr. Chair, I think the employment of SDTC employees is subject to their arrangements with the foundation. At the point in time they become NRC employees, then it'll fall under our regime for compensation, and that's a completely separate employer, and obviously we'll count for what we're doing with those employees once they join our organization.
Should they receive bonuses, though?
Mr. Chair, I have no views to share with the committee in terms of, you know, the work of SDTC employees and bonuses. That's something you should address to the organization itself.
Okay, I mean, with you taking it over, I would have hoped for a little more on that. But final line of questioning here: would ministers or Liberal political staffers be able to invest in companies that benefit from this green slush fund? Would any have investments? Would any be able to receive those investments?
So, Mr. Chair, without speculating, I think the question is really any of these people that have been mentioned in the question is what conflict of interest procedures apply to their own roles, and I think you'd have to address that to those individuals and in the circumstances. Certainly nothing I can give an account to.
Sorry to jump in, but NRC is going to be responsible for giving out this money. So what conflict of interest procedures would apply to dispensing those funds?
Mr. Chair, as I said, the conflict of interest policy of the National Research Council will apply to any program that comes under our care. And certainly in this case, it will apply to the Sustainable Development Technology Programming funding that we will have care of once we've had it transferred.
Have rules that would prevent this kind of conflict of interest, that would prevent political staffers, ministers who own companies from having those companies benefit. Do your rules prevent that? I think it's a simple, clear question, and I'm not getting an answer. Can you give a clear answer? Would your existing policies allow staffers, ministers to benefit? Yes or no?
Mr. Chair, the conflict of interest policy of the NRC and our administration of funds is taken place by professionals. They'll direct funds where there's eligibility and benefits for Canadians, and with the application of our conflict of interest policy to their activities. And we take those decisions within the National Research Council.
Thank you, Mr. Genuis. That is...
Chair, I'd like to raise a point of order.
I'll hear a point of order. Yes, Mr. Genuis.
Thank you, Chair. I think I pretty clearly and repeatedly asked the question that the witness pretty clearly refused to answer despite multiple attempts. I'd like to ask you to put the question to the witness and ask him to inform him of his obligations as a witness. I didn't ask if they had a conflict of interest policy. I asked what the policy is, and witnesses have an obligation to answer clear questions, especially when repeatedly asked over and over again in a clear form.
Thank you, Mr. Genuis. I have a point of order as well from Ms. Khalid.
On that same point of order, Chair, I don't think that is a point of order at all, and I don't think that that we can force an answer from witnesses.
Well, I do have that ability. Having said that, I am. Mr. Davies is here. He's answering questions. We might not like the answers. I think his non-answers speak for themselves. You will have one other round, the official opposition. You're welcome to press it again. I am going to move on. Ms. Khalid, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thanks very much, Chair. And I would like to talk more reasonably than the previous round. So the Canadian Council of Innovators sees the Canada Innovation Corporation as a fundamental shift in approach in supporting innovation and growth, given its focus on commercialization and protecting Canadian IP from leaving our shores. How fundamental is this, in your view, to supporting growth in our country, especially at a time where business investment is low and we're dealing with challenges with respect to productivity?
Mr. Chair, obviously it's critical when we speak about Canadian benefits in the programs that we're talking about administering. It really is in regards to seeing those businesses be able to grow, be able to create IP, be able to see the returns and the benefits of that captured here in Canada for benefits of Canadians and Canadian workers. All that's very critical, and I think seeing those kinds of investments, which are risky, undertaken and supported, and seeing things grow here in Canada is really the ultimate goal of these programs, and it's obviously a critical long-term objective for the economy, and really important because that's what establishes the life that we all here enjoy in Canada, and establishes kind of productivity performance that we need to have as a country. And many of these initiatives are all aimed at that, including, as was mentioned, the Canada Innovation Corporation. Yes.
Thanks for that. And what would be the impacts on business without programs like SDTC and IRAP? Given that business investment is low, what state would innovation be in our country without government supports like this?
So, Mr. Chair, it's long been looked at as far as the support that's provided from public and different types of programming, whether it's through tax incentives or direct supports, that these are critical, particularly at the early stage of technology development and innovation. This is a place where the risks often outweigh the potential returns, or even the ability to assess those returns. And these programs, I think, are there to ensure that that activity takes place, because if it didn't happen, then we would all be worse off. Each country has an approach to this. Canada has a system of various programs and tax supports and so on, which are all there aimed to help support financing of activities that are obviously going to support growth for the long term, including NRC, IRAP, and of course the SDTC program for its life. And so obviously keeping that programming available to the sector and to the innovators and entrepreneurs is the objective of the current exercise that we're involved in to bring this transition to a conclusion on a timely basis.
Thank you for that. And I couldn't agree with you more. We need to support these industries in order for Canada to have a say in the world stage. I think it is very important for us to develop and continue to improve these programs to make sure that that our industries are improving and that the Canadian economy is growing, because it matters right down to each individual Canadian. Now, you know, the Conservatives are quite hell-bent on undermining program innovators, startups, and small businesses, you know, that really help and support this country. Now, if the Conservatives can so easily go against business interest, their key constituency, why would Canadians ever trust them? And they're so hell-bent on destroying public trust of our public sector. It is, I think, very shameful that they're going to these lengths of really undermining what our public sector stands for, the work that the public sector does to ensure that industry thrives and continues to grow in Canada. That's all the questions I have, Chair.
I think that was more of a statement then, would you say? Yeah, okay, I didn't think you were looking for an answer, and I don't think the witness did as well. Okay, thank you very much. Encore une fois, c'est Madame Sinclair.
Once again, Ms. Sinclair Desgagnés for 2.5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Davies, you seem very confident in your responses on the topic of public servants' work with the NRC and their ability to manage the assessment of eligibility in different projects, but we know that SDTC, on the contrary, was misguided in their assessment of 10 projects' eligibility. There were conflict of interest problems. There were projects that were funded during the pandemic, despite the fact that they were ineligible. So the employees of SDTC not been working properly? Is that the problem?
Important for me to, consider fairly the employees that work at SDTC. They've been in a challenging circumstance. Obviously, there's been information brought to public's attention, processes that were undertaken to review human resources management at SDTC. I'll leave that to stand. We're not involved in that directly. I think we also want to provide an opportunity for those employees to join NRC IRAP and bring their talent and capabilities.
C'est exactement là où je m'en allais.
And that's actually the direction I was headed in, despite the fact, and once again, this goes with what you said earlier, staff needs to do their work well when approving a project. So if the project is approved despite the fact that it was ineligible, then there is an issue. So what is the issue? Are they not competent? Is it something else? So what are you going to do with all these employees that are going to come work for the NRC? Repeating what you said, if staff is doing their job properly, then an eligible project will not find itself funded.
That, in any given person's case of their own employment, that there's a due process. I think that's quite fundamental. And I think as a matter of the SCTC employees as a whole, we have been asked and will make offers to employees that can join our organization in good standing.
Donc, j'en comprends que beaucoup d'employés.
So what I'm understanding is that many SDTC employees will not receive an employment offer from NRC.
Mr. Chair, our job is to try to provide continuity of programming to take into the NRC the employees that can deliver it, and we've been asked to ensure that there's a continuity, and we certainly will ensure that that's done. And then employees that join us will have to meet our terms and conditions.
Mais vous n'avez pas répondu.
But you didn't answer the question. Will you take all the employees, part of them, maybe half? Will you take just a handful? How many SDTC employees will you be taking on? I know continuity is great, but we're looking for numbers here.
Overall population employees, numbers between 60 and 70, from what I understand. And we'll make employment offers to those that have an interest, and at the end we'll find how many employees decide to join our team. But we'll certainly be making offers to SDTC employees, as has been obviously shared with them. It's very important in the continuity of this work. They're there now working away on the transition. We also need those employees and their information, their knowledge, and their awareness of the sustainable technology goals in the program that we'll offer in the future. And it's important that we don't start off without having the kind of people that know how to adjudicate the files. And obviously, they'll come under our employment terms and conditions. And obviously, they'll have to meet those terms and conditions before they're employed by the NRC, including the application of our conflict of interest policy, which will be established and reviewed with everyone day one.
Et voilà. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Desjardins, this is your last 2.5-minute round. Over to you, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I again want to thank the witnesses for your testimony today and assisting us in our study related to SDTC and the very serious situation of conflict of interest, issues of mismanagement, issues of people on the board and even members of the ministry not knowing for certain the leadership that was required to ensure the successful delivery of what should have been a very successful program that would have assisted small and medium-sized businesses across Canada, would have assisted Canadian innovation, would have ensured that more jobs in Canada could have been created through this fund. But unfortunately, because of this mismanagement, it's clear to me, and I think clear to Canadians, that there's serious change that needs to be required while delivering a like program. We heard today that, of course, one of my biggest concerns, and the concerns I often hear from my constituents, is related to the recovery of funds, how funds will be recovered from ineligible projects. Mr. Davies, you did mention to me that there is an ongoing conversation. What is your role in that conversation, and what responsibility do you have in relation to that very important mandate that even the Auditor General cites as credible and important, particularly in my view, to building or rebuilding public trust?
Mr. Chair, the question is on the question of recovery. I think
recovery of funds of ineligible recipients. So
our role at this point is that we're not involved in the recovery process or evaluating that. It was, I believe, a topic that was discussed here previously. So I think the questions on that would be best addressed to the department or an SDTC or perhaps both to be able to.
So do you feel you have no role or responsibility in the recovery of these funds, even in the instance where some projects that are currently eligible haven't received funds because of the freezing of the fund that could be eligible under your new program? Wouldn't you say that you have some level of responsibility, or at least should advise SDTC as to the transfer of during the transfer of the program of the process that should be undertaken for the recovery of funds?
So, Mr. Chair, I think without having a final answer as to the structure of the transition, the structure of the transfer of the files, I'm not in a position to say exactly what may or may not apply to any given file.
I understand.
And whether
Mr.
there's
Davies,
an ongoing obligation.
my last comment would be, would you be willing to supply this committee, once you do have that information that you're seeking, that would better clarify for us and our committee and our study on behalf of Canadians, the process that will be undertaken for the recovery of funds, particularly as it relates to your role as the receiver of this new program and the terms and conditions that may be required or adhered to that would ensure the recovery of taxpayer dollar for ineligible funds. Would you commit to that today?
So, Mr. Chair, to the extent that we have a specific role in respect of recovery, we'd certainly share that with the committee or Canadians generally. And what I won't do is speculate exactly as to how those files will be addressed in the current process that's undergoing review between SDTC and the department. So, but I certainly can say going forward, if we have a role in recovery, then obviously we'll be very transparent about what it is.
Yes, please do. I'm very encouraged by that statement and hope that you could play a role in the recovery on behalf of Canadians. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that back and forth.